I never believed in that whole, if you dream about someone, it means they're real somewhere thing until last Tuesday. Seriously, it sounds cheesy, like something from a bad rom-com, but bear with me. I had this dream, not just any dream, but one where this guy was there, like vividly there. And here's the kicker. I saw him for real the very next day at the coffee shop down the street. Okay, so let me back up a bit and set the scene. I'm Mark, 28, living in the city that's too big to feel cozy, but too small to be totally anonymous. I work from home, which means a lot of my days blur into one another, punctuated only by my caffeine runs to the local coffee shop, a small, quirky place called Brew and Company. It's the kind of spot where the baristas know your name, or at least your order, and there's always some indie music playing softly in the background. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. That Monday night, I was tossing and turning more than usual. Stress from work, maybe, or just the usual spiral of overthinking everything. I finally drifted off, and that's when he showed up. The guy in my dream wasn't someone I recognized, and yet I felt this weird pull, like I'd known him forever but just couldn't place where or when. He had this easy smile, eyes that somehow felt both intense and kind, and he was sitting across from me in a sunlit room I'd never seen before. We didn't say much, just talked about nothing and everything all at once. It felt real, more real than anything I'd experienced in a while. I woke up with his face burned into my memory, still fuzzy but oddly clear at the same time, and I thought, okay, Mark, enough with the weird dreams, just grab your coffee and get on with your day. But the universe had other plans. The next morning, I shuffled into Brew and Company like I did every day, rubbing sleep from my eyes, half focused on my phone, half on the chalkboard menu above the counter. Then I looked up, and there he was, the same guy from my dream, standing right in front of me, ordering a latte with this exact half smile. The same way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. My heart did this stupid flip, like I was some teenager again, caught off guard by a crush. For a second, I thought I might be losing it. Maybe the dream was just my brain messing with me. Or maybe I'd seen him somewhere before and forgotten. But no, this was the exact same guy. And he turned around, caught me staring, and gave me this curious look, the kind that's part, "Who are you?" and part, "Do I know you?" I'm the kind of guy who can usually play it cool, but that moment, I was totally caught off guard. My mouth went dry, and all I could manage was a weak, "Hey!" like a total dork. He smiled again, and this time I noticed the little details, the way his hair caught the light, the subtle freckles on his nose, the way he held his cup like it was something precious. It was surreal, like something had just snapped into place. And right then, I knew this was not going to be just another day. Something about him and that impossible dream had set off a chain of questions in my head. Who was he? Why did he feel so familiar? And more importantly, was this just a coincidence or the start of something I wasn't ready for but couldn't ignore? So yeah, that's where I was when he said, "Hey, do you want to sit with me?" And suddenly, my normal coffee run was anything but ordinary. I blinked, caught off guard. I mean, who just invites a complete stranger to sit with them at a crowded coffee shop? But there was something in his voice, calm, friendly, maybe even a little hopeful, that made it impossible to say no. "Yeah, sure," I said, trying to sound casual, even though my heart was doing this ridiculous drum solo in my chest. He smiled again and pulled out the chair opposite me. As he sat down, I tried to figure out what to say next, but my brain was stuck on rewind, replaying that dream and this moment over and over. So, he started, glancing at my coffee cup like it was the most interesting thing in the world. "Do you come here often? I mean, besides today?" I laughed, nervous but genuine. "Yeah, pretty much every morning. It's my little escape from work chaos." "You?" "First time," he admitted. "My friend recommended this place. Said the lattes were worth crossing the street for." I nodded, still not quite able to look away. "I'm Mark, by the way." "Eli," he said, holding out his hand. I shook it, and all of a sudden it didn't feel like some random coincidence anymore. It felt like something was unfolding, like maybe the universe was nudging us both toward whatever this was. We spent the next few minutes just chatting about the usual stuff. Jobs, neighborhoods, favorite bands. He told me he worked in graphic design and had just moved to the city a couple of months ago. I shared my usual work-from-home routine and my terrible habit of binge-watching shows when I should be productive. But as the conversation went on, I realized I wanted to know more about him. Not just surface stuff. Like, where did that smile come from? What made him laugh genuinely? What was the kind of thing he'd admit to only after a few drinks? I was about to ask one of those deeper questions when his phone buzzed, and his face shifted for a moment. I caught a flicker of something, maybe stress or worry, before he quickly hid it behind a small smile. "Work stuff," he shrugged. "Sorry to be rude." I waved it off. "No worries." "I get it." And then, just as I was about to ask if he wanted to finish his latte with me tomorrow, he surprised me. "Hey, this might sound weird, but have we met before? Like, not here, but somewhere else? You look familiar." I almost laughed because that question was the exact reason I was staring at him like a lost puppy. Funny you say that. "I had this dream last night about a guy who looked exactly like you." "Crazy, right?" He raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "A dream? You're serious?" "Yeah, I mean, it sounds nuts, but it was so vivid. Felt like you were right there." Eli leaned back, looking thoughtful. "Maybe we're just meant to run into each other. Fate's way of messing with us." I smiled, liking the idea more than I expected. Fate was a cheesy excuse, but sometimes it made the best stories. For the next half hour, we talked more about dreams, favorite books, and the weird coincidences that make life interesting. The coffee shop started filling up, the morning rush creeping in, but I didn't want the conversation to end. Every time he laughed, it felt like the world got a little lighter. Eventually, he glanced at his watch and sighed. "I should get going, but hey, if you're around tomorrow morning, maybe we could try this again?" "I'd like that." "Definitely," I said, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. "Same time? Perfect," he said, standing up and grabbing his jacket. As he walked away, I realized I hadn't even asked for his number. But it didn't matter. Somehow, I knew I'd see him again. That night, I lay in bed, replaying every moment, every glance. The dream felt less like a coincidence now, and more like the first chapter of something I wasn't ready to write yet, but couldn't wait to start. The next morning, I found myself practically sprinting to Brewing Company, which is ironic because I'm usually the slowest, most reluctant morning person you'll ever meet. But the thought of seeing Eli again had me buzzing with a mix of nerves and excitement that I hadn't felt in years. I got there a little early, trying to act casual but failing miserably. I watched the door like a kid waiting for the ice cream truck, and honestly, it probably showed. The baristas gave me that amused look like, "Relax, Mark, it's coffee, not a blind date." Then he walked in, Eli, like he owned the place, or maybe just like he was the answer to some question I didn't know I'd been asking myself. He smiled when he saw me, the same easy smile from the dream and the day before, and I swear I could feel something shift in the air. "Morning," he said, sliding into the seat opposite me like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Morning," I replied, trying to sound cooler than I felt. "Got your usual?" He nodded toward the barista. "Yeah, but I might switch it up today." "You?" "Same as always." Can't mess with a good thing. We talked like we'd known each other forever, but there was this underlying tension, this something more, hovering between our words. We shared little details about our lives. Eli told me about his favorite coffee spots back home, his childhood dog named Max, and how he'd recently taken up painting again after years of neglecting it. I, in turn, shared stories about my failed attempts at cooking, my obsession with old vinyl records, and how my cat, Murphy, was basically the boss of the apartment. Somewhere between the sips and the stories, I caught myself stealing glances at him. The way his eyes lit up when he talked about painting, the way his fingers absent-mindedly tapped the table to the beat of a song only he could hear. At one point, he looked up, caught me staring, and raised an eyebrow with a teasing smile. "What?" I blurted, instantly regretting it. "Nothing," he said, but the sparkle in his eyes said otherwise. Our conversation was interrupted by the ding of a text on my phone. I glanced down. No name, just a number. My heart skipped. "Hey Mark, it's Eli," the message read. I forgot my wallet. Mind if I pay you back tomorrow? Also, I'd love to see you again. I grinned like an idiot. Tell him I said no problem, I mumbled to myself. I quickly typed back, no worries. Tomorrow sounds perfect. We both laughed when I showed him the message, and just like that, it felt less like chance, and more like something real was starting. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I caught myself daydreaming about our little coffee dates, wondering if he was thinking about me too. When I finally texted him that evening, it was the easiest thing I'd done all day. Had a great time today, looking forward to tomorrow. His reply came almost instantly. Me too. On day 3, things felt different. Comforting. Familiar. Like the kind of friendship that sneaks up and grabs your heart without you realizing until it's too late. We talked about everything. Our weird family quirks, the books that changed us, the music that defined our teenage years. I found myself opening up in a way I hadn't with anyone in a long time. At one point, Eli reached across the table and gently brushed a stray hair from my forehead. The touch was electric, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he held my gaze, and for a moment, the coffee shop faded away. Mark, he said softly, I'm glad you're in my dream. And now in my mornings. I smiled, swallowing the lump in my throat. Me too, Eli. Me too. We left Brew & Company together, stepping out into the crisp morning air, both reluctant to say goodbye. As we parted ways, Eli slipped his hand into mine, just for a second, but enough to promise this was just the beginning. I walked back home that day feeling lighter, like I'd been holding my breath without realizing it. And honestly, I can't wait to see where this goes. After that day, things started to feel different, like the rhythm of my life had subtly shifted, and Eli was the new beat I hadn't realized I'd been waiting for. We kept our morning coffee ritual going, each day feeling a bit more natural, a bit more like we belonged in the same story. On day 4, Eli surprised me by showing up with a sketchbook under his arm. We grabbed our usual spot by the window, and after a few minutes of chatting, he pulled it out and flipped to a page. There was a rough but beautiful drawing of the coffee shop, chairs, counter, even the baristas behind the espresso machine. Not bad, I said, genuinely impressed. Have you always been into art? He shrugged, a little embarrassed. I used to paint all the time in high school, then kind of stopped. Moving here made me want to pick it back up. It's like therapy. I nodded, understanding that feeling more than I expected. Yeah, sometimes you need a new canvas to figure yourself out. We spent the next hour swapping stories about our creative flops and small victories. I told him about my failed attempt to learn guitar years ago. Turned out I was better at making noise than music. He laughed so hard I thought he might choke on his latte. It was one of those moments where you realize you don't have to be perfect to connect. Later that week, Eli invited me to a small gallery opening downtown. Said one of his friends was showcasing some work, and he thought I might like it. I almost said no, partly because I was nervous about tonight feeling too serious, partly because nights out aren't really my thing, but something about Eli made me want to say yes, so I did. The gallery was this cozy, slightly artsy space, with walls covered in bold colors and abstract shapes. People mingled, sipped wine, and talked about the emotional depth of paintings. Meanwhile, Eli and I wandered through the room, slipping into easy conversation like we'd known each other way longer than a week. At one point, we stood in front of a painting that looked like a storm, chaotic swirls of dark blues and grays, with a single bright splash of yellow in the middle. It's about finding light in the chaos, Eli explained quietly. I glanced at him, surprised by how soft his voice had grown. I like that. Feels hopeful. He looked back at the painting, then at me. Yeah, I think meeting you has been like that for me. Unexpected light. My chest tightened, and I fought the urge to reach out and hold his hand. Instead, I just smiled and said, I feel the same. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he saw the world, the way he made the little moments feel important, and the way, when he looked at me, it was like he was trying to read all the stories I wouldn't say out loud. One evening, a few days later, we were walking through a nearby park, the city lights twinkling behind us. It was chilly, and Eli handed me his jacket, the fabric warm against my skin. We stopped by a bench, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. The silence wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, filled with a quiet kind of understanding. Then he turned to me, eyes searching, and said, "Can I be honest about something?" "Always," I replied, heart pounding. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Not of us, but of what this might mean. I haven't been in a real relationship in a long time. I don't want to mess this up." I reached out, brushing my thumb over his hand. "Neither do I. But I think it's worth the risk." He smiled, a little shaky but genuine. "Good, because I want to see where this goes, Mark. With you." That night, when I got home, I lay awake for a long time, replaying everything. Our laughs, our quiet talks, the way my world suddenly felt warmer. I realized that sometimes the best stories don't start with fireworks or grand gestures. They begin with a dream, a chance meeting, and the courage to say yes when the universe hands you something unexpected. Because some people come into your life and change the way you see everything. Even the ordinary things, like a cup of coffee or a quiet walk in the park. And Eli? He felt like the kind of unexpected light I'd been dreaming of all along. After that night in the park, things started to feel like they were slowly moving from just getting to know each other to something more. We weren't rushing anything, but there was this quiet current running between us, a kind of unspoken understanding that neither one of us wanted to mess up what was blossoming. One Saturday afternoon, Eli texted me out of the blue, "Want to come over? I'm making homemade pizza and could use some company." I was about to say no. Kitchen isn't exactly my natural habitat, but the thought of spending a few hours with him, away from the noise and the usual routines, was too good to pass up. So I said yes. His apartment was a cozy one-bedroom on the third floor of an older building. Nothing flashy, but it had this warmth that made you want to stay. There were paintbrushes and sketchbooks scattered around, and a few canvases leaned against the walls. Eli was already in the kitchen, tossing dough with a kind of determined focus that made my heart skip. "I warned you, I'm no professional," he joked when I arrived. "Doesn't matter," I said, sliding off my jacket. "Homemade beats delivery any day." We set to work together, me rolling out dough as best as I could without turning it into a pancake, him expertly layering sauce and cheese. We argued half-jokingly over toppings. He was a pineapple on pizza guy. I was staunchly against it. While the pizza baked, we collapsed onto the couch, the smell of melting cheese filling the room. Eli pulled out his sketchbook and showed me some new drawings, this time more abstract, full of swirling colors and shapes. "I've been trying to capture how I feel lately," he said quietly. "It's messy, but honest." I nodded, tracing the edge of the page with my finger. "Kind of like this whole thing between us." He laughed, a little nervous, a little hopeful. "Yeah, exactly." We talked about fears, past relationships, and the weird ways life brings people together. I told him about a relationship that ended badly years ago, the kind of heartbreak that made you question everything. Eli listened without interrupting, then took my hand and said, "I'm not here to hurt you, Mark. I want to build something real." It was the first time I felt completely seen, completely understood. And in that moment, I realized how much I wanted to believe him. The pizza came out golden and perfect. Definitely not a professional masterpiece, but ours. We ate it cold on the couch, laughing over our earlier topping debate. As the evening wore on, the conversation slowed, and the space between us seemed to shrink. I found myself leaning in, catching the faint scent of his cologne mixed with the warmth of the room. When our eyes met, there was a question in his gaze, a silent ask that I couldn't resist. I closed the distance and kissed him, soft, hesitant at first, then deeper, like discovering something I hadn't known I was missing. Later, lying side by side on the couch, our hands intertwined, I thought about that strange coincidence, a dream that led to a real person to this moment. It still felt a little unreal, but it was the best kind of real I'd ever experienced. We weren't perfect. There were misunderstandings and quiet doubts, but there was always honesty, and that made all the difference. One afternoon, Eli surprised me with tickets to a small concert, an indie band we both loved. The venue was intimate, the music raw and electric, and standing there with him, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. After the show, we walked under the city lights, the air crisp and full of promise. "I'm glad we met," Eli said, squeezing my hand. "Me too," I whispered, smiling. Sometimes life throws you these moments that feel like they belong in a story. Unexpected, a little shaky, but full of hope. And with Eli, I was ready to write that story. One day, one coffee, one heartbeat at a time. A few weeks into this unfolding story with Eli, it wasn't just the coffee runs or the way he laughed at my terrible jokes. It was the quiet mornings when we'd sit on my tiny balcony, the city waking up around us, and somehow, in that chaos, it felt like we'd found a calm corner just for the two of us. One Saturday, Eli showed up with that same sketchbook tucked under his arm, but this time, it was different. His eyes had that glint, a mix of nerves and excitement that made me instantly curious. "I've been working on something," he said, settling down beside me with a shy smile. "Want to see?" I nodded, heart beating a little faster. He flipped the pages slowly, revealing drawings that felt like snapshots of us, moments I hadn't even realized he'd noticed. There was a sketch of the coffee shop window where we met, with two figures inside, one nervously clutching a cup. Another showed the park bench where we'd talked about fears and hopes. The background a swirl of city lights and trees. I was quiet for a moment, overwhelmed by how deeply he'd captured parts of our story. "They're amazing," I finally said. "You have a real gift," he shrugged modestly. "I just wanted to hold on to these moments. Feels like everything's moving so fast." I reached out, brushing my thumb over his hand. "We don't have to rush. We can take all the time we need." He smiled, leaning his head against my shoulder. "I like that." That afternoon felt like one of those rare, perfect pauses, the kind you wish you could bottle up and keep forever. A few days later, I found myself at work, distracted like never before. My mind kept drifting back to Eli's sketches, to the way he looked at me when he thought no one was watching, to the feeling of his hand in mine. Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. "Dinner tonight?" "I know a little place with the best pasta in town." I didn't hesitate. "I'm in." That night, we met at a cozy Italian spot tucked away on a quiet street. The ambiance was warm. Dim lights, soft music, and the smell of garlic and fresh basil. We talked over plates of spaghetti and glasses of red wine, the conversation flowing easily, punctuated by laughter and those quiet moments when words felt unnecessary. After dinner, Eli suggested a walk. We strolled through the nearby park, the city lights casting long shadows on the path. At one point, he stopped and turned to me, his expression serious but gentle. "Mark, I know this has all been kind of sudden, but I'm really glad you're here. I haven't felt this connected to someone in a long time." I swallowed, feeling a mix of relief and happiness. "Me too, Eli. It's like you came out of nowhere and suddenly made everything make sense." He smiled, and then, without warning, he pulled me close and kissed me under the soft glow of a street lamp. It wasn't flashy or dramatic, just real and steady and full of all the things we'd been building together. We stayed like that for a while, wrapped up in each other and the quiet magic of the night. In the weeks that followed, our relationship deepened in ways I hadn't expected. We shared more than just coffee and laughter. We shared vulnerabilities, dreams, and the messy bits we usually keep hidden. One Sunday, Eli invited me to his place to cook dinner together. We decided on homemade pasta, this time a little more successful than my first attempt. As we kneaded dough and chopped herbs, the kitchen filled with warmth and the sound of our easy banter. Midway through, Eli paused, looking a little serious. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Anything. Have you ever thought about what comes next? Like, after this, us?" I took a breath, considering. "Honestly, yeah. I'm scared, but also hopeful. I want to see where this can go, without putting too much pressure on it." He nodded, relief washing over his face. "Me too." That night, as I walked home under the stars, I realized how much I'd been holding back before Eli came into my life. I was so used to playing it safe, keeping my heart guarded. But with him, I was learning to take chances again. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most terrifying and beautiful thing of all. A couple of weeks after that night cooking pasta together, I started noticing something different about myself. Not in some dramatic overnight kind of way, but in these small moments, like when I caught myself smiling at my phone before Eli had even texted back, or when a song would come on and suddenly feel like it was written just for us. One morning, I woke up to a message from Eli that read, "Coffee later? I have something to show you." Curiosity piqued. I agreed without hesitation. When I got to Brew & Company that afternoon, Eli was already there, sitting at our usual table with that sketchbook again, but this time, It was closed, his fingers resting on it nervously. "Hey," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Hey," he replied, eyes flickering between me and the sketchbook. "So, I've been working on a project. Something personal." He opened the book slowly, revealing a series of drawings that told a story. A story of two people meeting in a coffee shop, shy smiles exchanged, nervous hands clasped, moments growing into something deeper. It was us. In ink and pencil, I felt a lump catch in my throat. "Eli, this is incredible," he shrugged, cheeks pink. "I'm glad you like it. I just wanted to show you how much you mean to me, in my own way." I reached out, taking his hand in mine. "You don't have to prove anything. I already know." He smiled, relief washing over his face. Then, the moment shifted. The air between us thickened, and I realized how close we'd gotten, how much I wanted to reach across the table and pull him in. Instead, I settled for brushing my thumb over his knuckles, hoping he felt the same electricity I did. That night, we went for a walk along the river. The city lights shimmered on the water, and the air was cool but not cold, perfect for this kind of moment. We talked about dreams, those big, scary ones that keep you up at night. Eli shared his fears about moving again, about putting down roots in a new city, about trusting someone enough to let them in. I told him about my own worries, the kind that hang around like ghosts from past mistakes, threatening to pull me back. But walking beside him, hand in hand, I felt like maybe those fears didn't have to define me anymore. A few days later, Eli surprised me with tickets to a weekend getaway. Just the two of us, a small cabin upstate, no distractions, just space to be together. I was hesitant at first. The idea of spending that much time with someone, away from everything familiar, was intimidating. But Eli's excitement was contagious, and deep down, I knew I wanted to take that leap. The cabin was exactly what we needed. Cozy, quiet, with a fire pit out back and a view of the stars that felt endless. We spent our days hiking through woods, stealing kisses behind trees, and sharing stories neither of us had told anyone else. At night, we'd sit by the fire, sipping wine and talking about everything and nothing. One evening, after a particularly long walk, we curled up on the couch, the crackling fire painting our faces in warm light. Eli looked at me, eyes soft. "Mark, being here with you, it feels like home." I smiled, heartful. I've never felt that way before, not like this. He leaned in, resting his forehead against mine. "Me neither." That weekend changed something. It wasn't about grand gestures or sweeping declarations. It was about the quiet certainty that we were building something real, something worth holding on to. When we got back to the city, life resumed its usual pace, but with a new layer. Something deeper, steadier, a connection that didn't fade when the coffee ran out or the work piled up. One night, sitting on my couch with Eli beside me, I realized how much I'd grown to care for him. Not just the easy parts, but the messy, complicated bits too. And when he reached over, taking my hand in the dark, I knew that whatever came next, we'd face it together. Because sometimes, the best stories start with a dream, but they're written in moments like this, quiet, real, and full of hope. It was a chilly evening when everything finally felt like it had settled into place. The kind of night where the city hums softly under streetlights, and all the noise of the day fades into a comforting quiet. Eli and I were sitting on my balcony, wrapped in a shared blanket, sipping cheap wine and watching the world go by. Neither of us needed to fill the silence. It was just right, like a song you already know the words to. He turned to me, eyes reflecting the soft glow of the city lights. "You ever think about how we met, that dream of yours, and then seeing me at the coffee shop?" I smiled, remembering the surreal shock of that first moment. "Yeah, it felt impossible, like some kind of cosmic joke. But now I'm thankful. I can't imagine not having found you." Eli reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "Me neither. You've become the part of my day I look forward to most." We sat like that for a moment, the simple touch speaking louder than any grand gesture ever could. Over the months, we learned each other's rhythms, the way Eli liked his coffee just so, the way I hummed when I was nervous, the little habits that made us who we were. There were mistakes, sure, moments when uncertainty crept in, or when words were left unsaid. But beneath it all was a foundation of trust and care that kept us steady. One Sunday morning, as sunlight poured through the window and warmed the room, Eli surprised me with a small box, a simple thing, wrapped in brown paper with a string. Inside was a delicate silver ring, understated but meaningful. "I'm not into big shows," he said, cheeks flushed. "But I want you to know that I'm in this for the long haul. For us." I looked at him, heartful, feeling a quiet joy that didn't need fireworks or fanfare. "Eli," I said, voice thick with emotion, "I've never been more sure of anything." We slipped the ring on my finger, and in that small moment, the future felt like something we could face together. Imperfect, uncertain, but ours. Looking back, it's wild to think it all started with a dream, a chance encounter at a coffee shop, and a simple hey that opened the door to everything. Sometimes, love doesn't come with a fanfare or a script. Sometimes, it arrives softly, in the everyday moments, in the quiet space between words, and in the courage to say yes even when you're scared. And for me, finding Eli was finding home.